Hello YouTube, I'm Nix. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to cover a story from No Sleep subreddit. It's called The Traveler. The story is from the Reddit user Will Rain. He has more great stories posted on Reddit, so check him out. And with that, let's begin. I'm scared to even move. I can see him out there right now, just staring in from the other side of the street. I try to not even set foot on the ground anymore, like some ridiculous game of floor is lava, but I can't risk too many more steps. I didn't believe her, you know? I mean, how could I? If I'd listened to her warning, I may at least have a little more time. There's so little left now. This whole ordeal began about 12 years ago, give or take. In her defense, she did try to tell me everything. Everything she knew, anyway. If I'd done what she said, I may have attempted to pass this one as she did, though the idea of that is horrifying in itself. I just couldn't doom anyone else to this fate, even if my demise may be ungodly agonizing. I can't say I'm not second guessing my choices though, now that I'm so close to the end. We had only been together for maybe 4 months or so, but when she brought up the idea of taking a trip to Hawaii, I was a little apprehensive, to be honest. Sure, a pleasant getaway with someone else growing closer to each day sounded nice, but we lived in Florida. Was it really necessary to go to the expense of such a trip, just to see some potentially somewhat nicer beaches than the ones only a few miles away? Come on, don't you wanna see the world? She said, gazing at me with an enthusiastic smile from beside me on the bed. I mean, yeah, but that's an expensive ass trip. This wasn't exactly one of those on a whim type vacations. That's for a regular working guy in his 20s with a healthy amount of debt already built up. What if I say I'll pay for it? She replied, running her fingers through my hair, pecking her lips against my neck. What? To have some secret Swiss bank account you never told me about? I said with a laugh. I wasn't trying to be rude or dismissive or anything, but she worked a 9 to 5, just like I did. Sure, throughout our short time as a couple, we hadn't exactly talked about finances much, but I was certain she didn't have that sort of money just to throw around. I got some in savings. I don't mind using it for a good cause. I mean, that's awesome and all, but I can't ask. You're not asking, I'm offering. I'm practically throwing it at you, for God's sake. She laughed again. Come on. I guess? I mean, if that's really what you... I didn't get to finish my words before she almost threw herself on top of me, wrapping her arms and legs as far around me as she could while she straddled me on the queen-size mattress. It'll be great, she said, kissing me on the forehead, the tip of my nose, and finally on the lips. You'll see. Still couldn't say whether we were at a crazy expensive getaway point in our relationship, but she made a convincing argument. If nothing else, it was good to see her happy and excited about something. She had been a bit distant over those past few weeks, not enough for me to wonder if our relationship was hitting a bit of a speed bump, but something had been off with her. I couldn't put my finger on it at the time, but I would come to learn exactly what troubled her soon enough. It was around the third day of our trip that her behavior began to grow a bit unusual. We were just having our meal at a beautiful outdoor cafe near the beach when she started just staring off, with something of a look of fear in her eyes. I turned to see if I could make out what she was looking at, whatever or whoever had her appearing so unsettled. But all I could see were people walking this way and that. "What's wrong?" I asked. "You look spooked." "Huh? Oh, it's nothing. I just..." She cut her eyes down to the table before fidgeting with her phone. She had barely even touched her delicious looking sandwich, nor had she slipped much of her pina colada. We had made a little small talk. "Where do you wanna go next? Should we grab some drinks and take them to the room?" Nothing major, but she seemed so distracted at the time. I could barely even get any sort of straight answer. It carried on like that for most of the following day, and she barely even wanted to leave the condo we had rented for the week. Even when we sat alone in the bedroom, she still gazed off from time to time, with her eyes wide and her lower lip quivering a little. I tried to press her more about what was going on, but she wouldn't tell me anything. It wasn't until that fifth night, after having barely stepped outside for the better part of 24 hours, that she let me in on the secret she had been keeping. As dusk was approaching, she finally left the comfort of her plush mattress, took me by the hand, and led me outside. The gorgeous condo was right next to the sand, so we could easily step on the beach at any time. The view was absolutely glorious, and the sound of the waves brushing against the shore provided such a magical soundtrack to our time away. Unfortunately, those sounds only fill me with dread now. "It's time," she said, as she sat down upon the sand, some 15 feet or so from the shore. She wouldn't look at me while she spoke, only stared off to where the water rushed across the moistened sand. Had I really listened to her, or even been able to believe what she told me that day, I may have been able to make arrangements to preserve my life. I'm not entirely sure I could have ever done what she did to survive, but none of that really matters anymore. Not really. When this is done, you have 24 hours to get as far from here as you can. He won't make a move for the first day. You're not making any sense, hon. Who won't move? You can't see him. Not yet. From what I've been told, he can't see you either. He only sees me right now. She still gazed straight forward while she spoke in an emotionless yet trembling voice. I honestly thought she was either messing with me or was possibly on something. We had both indulged in a good bit of alcohol over the previous days, and I had known her to pop the occasional pill or three over the time I know her. She told me they were prescriptions when I asked her about them one day, but she never told me what they were supposed to be treating. Granted, we hadn't been together long, so perhaps we hadn't made it to the revealing medical or psychological issues part of our relationship yet. But I never did get an answer for what sort of meds she was even taking. I did catch a glimpse of one of the bottles one time, but it was so quick that I didn't even see the name of the medication. I did see that it was not her name on the label though. I never pushed it, as it didn't quite seem like my place at the time. She never came off as under the influence of anything. No erratic mood swings, or bouts of unexpected giddiness or anything. She never had the saggy and mentally checked out eyes or less than purposeful body movements and the like, so I just brushed my concerns aside. I suppose I just chalked it up to exactly what she said, that she had to take them. Perhaps, if I had pushed the topic more, she may have given me some answers before then, but no sense crying over spilled pills and salt water brushing over the sand, I suppose. Either way, her words were not making a bit of sense to me at the time, but they do now. Oh yes, they're crystal clear now. You, you sound a bit crazy, you know that, right? I said with a nervous chuckle. I do, I know it sounds crazy, but I need you to hear me, she said, finally cutting her eyes to meet mine. They were red and somewhat swollen, with tears already trickling out from within. Hey, I said, running my fingers through her hair. What's got you so upset? You can tell me anything, you know. I'm trying to, but you're not listening. She wrapped her fingers around the hand I ran across her face. You have to hear me. I'm listening, sweetheart. Just... No, you're not, she said, cutting my words short. Please, just let me speak for a minute, okay? Okay, I replied with a sigh. I won't say another word until you're done. I shrugged, closing the invisible zipper across my mouth. She sighed, rolling her eyes while looking as though she was beginning to lose her cool a bit. I smiled at her, to which she returned with an empty grin before she began to speak again. What she told me would not truly register for many years, and by the time I truly understood, well, the damage was done, I suppose. I inherited this from someone I used to know, someone who told me what I'm trying to tell you, and I pray to God you have the strength to tell another someday. The farther you get, the longer you have. After that first day has passed, he will take a step for every one you take. You can drive, you can fly, you can go anywhere and do anything. But however close he was with the last step you shared, he will be just as close when you walk again. She kept cutting her eyes back to the shore, but the more she spoke, the more confident she sounded in her words. That's why I wanted you to come here. You can go home again and live a normal life for a long time. It could take decades for him to reach you if you're careful. He shouldn't get within a shout of you for many years, but when he does, you have to do what I'm doing now. I am so sorry for this, and if I'd listened back then, I'd still have more time to pass this on, but as it turns out now, he's only a few steps away. And if I don't do this, I don't wanna die. I care about you, I really do, but we can't see each other after this. Whoa, I said, dropping her hand from mine. You're dumping me? Is that what all this shit is about? You brought me all the way here to break up with me? No, she said, reaching her hand to meet mine again before I pulled it away. I don't have a choice. I need... Oh, you need? What exactly do you need? I could feel my face burning and my chest heaving with rage. You have got to be shitting me. I got up to my feet before readying myself to stomp away and start packing my suitcase when she reached up and grabbed my hand again. Please don't go. Not yet. I yanked my hand back again, charging away from her like a spoiled child pitching a tantrum. No, she screamed out in such a frenzied and crazed manner that it caused me to stop in place. I turned to see her standing where we had sat only moments before, cutting her eyes frantically between me and the waves caressing the sand. She looked as though she wanted to come closer to me, but appeared as though she was too scared to move. She outstretched her hand towards me while she began to sob almost uncontrollably. Just the sight of her looking in so much anguish as she darted her eyes back and forward made me want to run back into her arms, but I felt so betrayed at the time. I didn't know what to think. Please, she begged, holding both arms in front of her as she stayed rooted to the spot. "What do you want from me?" I asked, feeling almost exhausted from this whole ordeal. I want you. I want us. But just come here. Please, just... I was already pacing back towards her, though my mind was still all over the place. I was confused, to say the least, but I have grown to care so much for her over our short time together that I couldn't stand to see that look on her face. In all honesty, I wasn't sure if she was even mentally sound at the time with the way she was carrying on, but I wanted to help her. In some ways, I think I would still gone to her, even if I had understood what was going on, though I feel a good deal differently about that now. I was only a few feet from her while she still darted her head back and forth. She glared at my approaching feet and back to seemingly vacant beachfront behind her, before taking 2 wide steps to reach me. She wrapped her arms around me, kissed me far more passionately than I think she ever had before, and took 1 small step back, holding my hands in hers. "I wish things could gone differently," she said, with tears still trickling down her reddened face. I couldn't tell if she was so rosy because of the time spent under the blistering sun, or if she was flushed from this bizarre conversation, but she appeared truly saddened at the time. Whatever it was behind her gaze, when she slipped 1 hand free from mine, she closed her eyes, before taking 1 more step backwards, still keeping her fingers entwined with mine, while reaching out behind her with the hand she had pulled free. It wasn't until she gripped onto the man who stood directly behind her that I even noticed him. But the moment I laid my eyes on him for the first time, I screamed so loudly that I thought I might just wake the dead. I'm not sure if it was simply the fact that I saw no trace of anyone else before that moment that filled me with horror at the time, or if it was those piercing, yellow eyes that cut from the woman I once saw a future with to my trembling gaze. He was neither big nor small, just average in height and size, but the proportions didn't quite seem right. What appeared to be dark grey flesh on his bony forearms hung a good 3 inches from the white cuffs of his faded blue and dusty pea coat. Equally as slender shins protruded from his wide and baggy jeans to high-topped muddy black work boots, leaving only an inch or so of the dark flesh in between. The collar was pulled high around his face, with a thick, black, woolen knit cap pulled down to his brow, but that was all I needed to see to know I did not want to see the rest. Even with the subtle glow of the shimmering yellow eyes seemingly illuminated from just above the collar of his coat, it did not reveal any detail of the face beneath. I was actually thankful for that much, as I wanted to see as little of this man as possible. It was the constant dripping of what looked like blood from his somewhat elongated fingers that almost caused my knees to weaken. The way his crimson-stained fingers wrapped around her unsoiled digits made the sight even more unnerving. Even as the blood streamed from his hand to hers, it left no trace upon her skin. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice quivering from the far more aggressively flowing tears. "I'm so sorry, but the Reisende is yours now. Get as far away as you can. Find someone to pass him to before he reaches you. If he gets you, he'll kill you. It'll hurt, like, a lot. From what the one who passed him to me told me. What the actual you can beat him. You just pass it on, okay?" I couldn't convince myself to speak. I just felt so irrationally terrified at the time. I still didn't believe a word she told me, but my disbelief did not explain away the madness of this strange man appearing out of nowhere. Don't try to find me. If you do, I think he'll take his boat. Just get back home and don't take any unnecessary steps, okay? Where did he come from? I asked, still attempting to wrap my mind around this. She finally pulled her hand from mine and placed it on my face. I really, truly am sorry. I think we had something here, but just take care of yourself. For me, yeah? Those were the last words she said to me before she ran back to the room we shared over those days by the beach. I was left alone on the sand, with the man in the pea coat glaring at me. As I paced backwards, I halfway expected him to follow, but he didn't so much as twitch while I got further and further away from him. He just stood there, even as I began to refill my suitcases with everything I had brought for the week away. While I whipped clothes from the hangers and the drawers I flung open, I noticed an envelope sitting on the dresser with my name scribbled across it. In a way, I wasn't surprised to see the plane ticket within, nor the note reiterating the story she had spun before she introduced me to her body. It would seem this was her plan all along, to lead me far from the town I lived in, to at least give me some time to weasel my way out of this. Throughout the flight back to the state I left behind some days before, I allowed myself to believe this was all just a crazy prank, some farce to make this breakup easier on her. She had wanted to dump me, perhaps from the beginning, but maybe she just felt bad for me or something. Sure, this was quite the extreme series of events to finance, only to split from a guy she'd only known for a few months. But it made a hell of a lot more sense than her passing on some supernatural curse. The guy on the beach may have simply been hiding while she gave the performance of a lifetime. He was all made up with prosthetics and the works, while she distracted me with her tears and moans. I bet he was the guy she was ditching me for, too. She likely ran back into his arms as soon as I was out of sight. I was certain they had quite the laugh at my expense, with me buying into her insane story like the gullible asshole I am. The more I allowed those thoughts to dance across my mind, the more I believed every word of it. I mentally beat myself up for believing her ridiculous lies, and by the time I arrived back in my hometown, I had myself convinced there was nothing to fear. I moped around for the next couple of weeks and even came close to calling her a few times, but I had a feeling if she had gone to such extremes to break up with me, she likely wouldn't be so easy to reach. Throughout my period of self-pity and brooding, I did look up the term Der Reisende to find it basically translated to the traveler. I suppose it made sense with the claim she made about him. Even that simple thing pissed me off, as I imagined her searching up fitting ideas for a name online, before settling on a German term that sounded foreboding enough to fit the bill. I grew more angry and bitter with every passing day until my wallowing period came to an end. I was never good with rejection, so I'm not exactly proud of the fact it took me a good couple of months to get over a relationship that lasted just a little longer than it took me to get past it. Regardless of my insecurities and otherwise shameful behavior, I had all but forgotten about the traveler by the time I got back into the swing of regular life again. As more time passed by, the strange man in peacoat was a distant memory as the one who introduced me to him. I went through a few more relationships during the decade that followed, till I finally found someone I thought may just be the one. My younger and far more cynical self hadn't always indulged in the belief in such a thing, but Sylvie made me happier than I could ever imagine. We had been together for a year or so, and I was right on the verge of popping the question any day. I'd even pick out the ring, which rested in the pocket of every pair of pants or jacket I wore for the 2 straight months. I had planned everything out. The night I planned to take a knee before the woman I loved. It was her favorite spot in the city, the one we met at. I loved to pretend it was that very event that sparked her love for the rooftop tavern, but she had been a regular for years before we shared our first drink. It was a fairly classy joint, all things considered, but not overly so. Though my crappy job from my younger years had inspired me to finally earn a degree and a career to boot, I still wasn't prone to spending hundreds of dollars on a simple night out on the town. For her, well, I would be less inclined to be so penny pinching, but it was still nice that her special place was one well within comfortable spending limits. My stomach was in knots as we took our usual table, right by the edge of the roof. From there, we could damn near see for miles over the neighboring rooftops and across the street of the city, but it was only her eyes I looked into that night. I was almost certain she would give me the answer I was seeking, but I was still almost cripplingly nervous while we laughed and drank at her lovely roofside table. I imagine this may sound like I'm exaggerating for the sake of dramatic emphasis or something, but I swear it was just as I reached my trembling fingers into my pocket to retrieve the little box that something caught my eye. I felt my face drain every single drop of blood it held, while the nervous churning in my gut shifted to something that almost caused me to retch across my beautiful girlfriend. Just about all I could make were those subtly glowing eyes at first. While so much of the city was blanketed in darkness, I could barely see the silhouette from such a distance away, but that shimmering, amber glare felt like it was boring into my skull. I wasn't sure exactly how close he'd gotten, as it wasn't easy to read from where we sat, but as everything the woman, whose name I couldn't even remember anymore, had said came flowing back to me, I ran for the restroom without saying a word. While I offered the contents of my still churning stomach to the porcelain god, I realized my sprint had likely inspired the traveler to come even closer. When Sylvie knocked on the door, asking if I was alright, it caused my anguish to grow even more agitated. It was then, as the realization this curse was not just the ramblings of a crazy ex hit me, that I knew I could not follow through with the plans I had made for that night. When we finally made it back to our table, I glanced over again to see the man moved from beneath the street lamp to what appeared to be maybe 10 to 20 feet closer. He was still a good distance away, still revealing no more than his shadowed form and glowing eyes, but he was definitely closer now. Every step I took as we headed back to the house my would-be fiancé and I shared caused my chest to quake, as I couldn't know how much longer I had until my old body caught up with me. Though it practically shattered me to do so, I had to put an end to my relationship with the woman I adored with my whole heart and soul. I couldn't risk passing this to her, and I would not want her to have to endure my premature death if I didn't force someone else to take this from me. It hurt so much more than I can even begin to put into words to tell her I had to end things, but it was my only choice, the only one I could see anyway. As the weeks went by, she attempted to reach out to me so many times, but I had to keep her far from arm's length, even if it felt as though it would kill me long before the traveler made it to my front door. After some time, I believe she got a hint that we would not rekindle, but I still long for her, even now, even with the end so close. Over the months that followed, I tried to limit my walking as much as possible. I even went to the extreme of buying a wheelchair to get around in, but I was only delaying the inevitable at that point. I had to fake some sort of medical condition to get away with using the chair at work, but fortunately, nobody pushed the topic. It's amazing how much people will accept to avoid potentially awkward conversations. Even with taking such a limited amount of steps, I still couldn't avoid my feet touching the floor from time to time. Maybe if I'd taken more precautions, I could have still have stretched it out a little longer, but there's not much I can do now. As I sit here, typing out these words, I can see him staring through my window from the other side of the street. When I'm at my desk at work, he's just down the hall. I can't always see him, but I feel his eyes on me. I have considered trying to pass this on, even if it meant cursing some poor pizza delivery kid or random asshole at work, but I can't bring myself to do it. If I had more time, I may have tried to convince some poor bastard to take a trip with me, before handing them over to their Risende on a silver platter. But I couldn't do that, could I? I can't say I'll have the same conviction by the time he gets into my house, but I hope I'm strong enough to give him what he wants. Maybe though. I mean, would it make me an awful person if I found a way to hand this over to someone? I suppose it's a little more than the fact that I'm fucking terrified at the moment. But to anyone who is reading this, perhaps you would be so kind as to give a dying man some advice. If you're in this situation, what would you do? Would you pass it on and live with the burden of knowing you may have damned someone to a fate you were too chicken shit to face? Or would you accept the cards that fate has dealt you? All things considered, if the next potential victim would actually listen to the warnings, this could go on forever, with nobody ever having to find out what the traveler had in store for them. If it sounds like I'm making some sort of sales pitch, well, I suppose I am, now that I think about it. Call it the last minute desperation of a poor, damned soul. But would anyone out there be willing to meet my old friend? For a price, of course. How much would it take to make something like this worthwhile?
Come on, what do you say?
And that was The Traveler. The ending was brilliant. The author is correct. With proper precaution, you would most likely never have to meet the Risende in your life. If that comes with a good payday, it might actually be a good deal. Thank you all for being here today. Hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, please give a like and subscribe, as it will help the channel grow. And until next time, take care.